Those of you that haven't met me, I'm Sarah Cooley, and you also would have heard just now from my colleague Nick Hardwick. We've both been responsible for putting together some schedules for webinars, and we're absolutely delighted that our first webinar is our very own founder, Ignacio Mas, who's going to talk to you about a topic that I know he's incredibly passionate about and got lots of thoughts on around smart money, and why we should have to pit, physical money against digital money. Why can't we have both at the same time? So Ignacio, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So I will be telling you about some technological innovation, but really what I'm interested in is not in the technology itself. So I really would urge you to think about this as a thought experiment. Imagine that this was possible. Does that make you change some of the views that you have about how the future might unfold? We tend to treat money as a beauty contest. There's a comment that Jimmy can't hear anything. Do we think that's generalized to everybody else, or?
Is anyone else having some issues with hearing? If you can you pop something in the comments?
You're always okay. Okay, I'll proceed. So we're the mental framework in which we've fallen into is that there is only one possible end to money. And so it's a beauty contest between the old and the new. The old, we kind of reluctantly admit, has some advantages, cash, but it's just standing in the way of progress of the new. And so we need to discard the old in order to embrace the new. That's not really how most situations are dealt with, by ditching the old in order to make room for the new. We generally, when there's two versions of something in a digital context, we generally solve it by having interoperability, not by picking and choosing. So I might be on one version of Windows, you might be on a different one, someone might still be on Vista for all I care, and we're still working together because there's interoperability across all different platforms. So we don't all need to be at the same point on the curve of evolution of money or anything else. But with money or on digital platforms, but for money, somehow we want to push everybody to the frontier to digitize their money, because somehow the fact that some people are stuck in cash is holding the rest of us back from progress. Again, I don't think the answer is picking one type of money or the other, at least not from a policy point of view. I think that people should pick one or the other. So as a consumer choice process, but not as a design solution that there can only be one. So it's a problem of interoperability. And what's interesting is, of course, that the interoperability problem between physical cash and digital money is very close. I call it the last millimeter problem, because I can get my bill 1 millimeter away from my mobile phone, which represents my account, or at least gives me access to my account. So I can get it 1 millimeter from the SIM card, but no further. It's a last millimeter problem. And how do we solve this last millimeter problem? Well, today, in a very clunky way, we turn it into a last mile problem, because in order to bridge that last millimeter between my bill and my phone, now I have to get out the door, walk several blocks, hopefully, if I'm lucky, find an agent. And so we're turning a last millimeter problem into a last mile problem. The agent networks, which is the big innovation of mobile money, is the interoperability solution between physical cash and the new type of digital money. But it's a very clunky, awkward, and inconvenient form of interoperability, because I need to go somewhere. It's not happening in real time, because by definition, I need to go somewhere else. I need to be somewhere else in order to take advantage of that interoperability. And of course, what it does, it brings cost all the way back into digital money. The big advantage of digital money is that it's so much cheaper to make transactions, at least in a remote basis, when there's distance between payer and receiver. But if I have to find an agent at one end and the other person has to find an agent at the other end in order to interoperate with cash, then we brought cost back into the system, and that kind of makes the economics of mobile money much more difficult. Mobile money platforms are easy to build. They're incredibly easy to build. What's difficult is to build the cash liquidity network around them, the agent network. So is there another way to interoperate between physical bills and digital money? Well, that's what I posit with these smart banknotes, which really are about putting more technology in bills, in banknotes. And let me take a little digression here. Banknotes are an incredible piece of technology. We tend to dismiss it as old, ancient, atavistic, anachronistic. But in fact, the amount of technology embedded in a banknote is pretty impressive. And the reason why the technology is there is because banknotes trade on what I call visual acceptance. You give me a bill, I look at it, maybe I touch it, visual and tactile, and just by looking at it, I can accept it as real money, with a fair degree of accuracy, at least enough to work well in modern society. That is an amazing thing, that I can recognize money, which is a completely abstract notion. I can recognize an abstract notion visually. That's amazing. In computer science, one of the biggest trends that we see is what's called natural language interfaces. So that computers, I can relate with computers in the digital world, not through some technical commands I have to type into the computer, but rather through my gestures, through my speech, and so on. That's the future of computing, where there is a much more seamless interaction between our sensory experiences, our bodily experiences, and what the computer takes as an input and issues as outputs. That is a huge research agenda in computer science. With money, we already have it. It's here. It's called banknotes. I can use my eyes, I can use my fingers to check the validity of money, which again, I repeat, is an abstract notion. That is a remarkable thing. And yet we're wanting to throw that away. We talk about that as being old-fashioned. I find banknotes to be ragingly modern in their pursuit of a natural interface with humans. So I don't think cash is anachronistic. I think it's a fantastic set of technologies. Now, that doesn't make it perfect for everything. It certainly doesn't work well when you want the money to travel long distances, and for that, digital is much, much better. So again, we have two forms of money. One that has an advantage of working very well in proximity because it uses my direct sensory experience to accept money. I don't need to be looking for devices, versus the digital money that works very well long distance, but then I'm stuck to a particular electronic acceptance network because I cannot interpret the zeros and ones as being valid money myself. So I need to rely on some device that tells me whether the money that you sent me is good money or not good money. And of course, with that electronic acceptance come a lot of assumptions that I need to make about my daily life. That when I need to make a payment, there will be an electronic acceptance device. Maybe it's my mobile phone, but then I have to assume that my mobile phone will not run out of batteries, that I will not drop it on my way there. So that the other person actually will take electronic money as well. So digital money comes with a huge amount of assumptions that you need to make in order to see it as a universal solution. Not so cash. Cash is the opposite. It takes no assumptions because It just requires someone who can see and touch, and that's good enough. So it's the complete opposite. Why are we being asked to choose? Why are those of us who are in favor of digital money as being a good solution for poor people being forced in the process to deny them the option of sticking with cash in context where that makes sense for them? So I'm pro digital money, but I think digital money is served by finding better interoperability solutions with cash than the very, very, very clunky agent solution that we have today. So that's the broad philosophical background around this. I don't want to have to pick between digital money and cash. And by the way, these are the same money. All we're discussing is the format of money. Think of it as, when there were coins and then there was paper. Those were interoperable between paper money and coin money and remain to this day. Why shouldn't we seek the same level of interoperability with the new format of money, which is digital? So how can you imagine a more direct, seamless, real-time interoperability between cash, physical banknote, and your bank account, which is physical as well, except that it's not physical where you are. It's physical sitting in a server in some bank's data center. Well, all we need to do is continue the process of putting more and more technology on banknotes. And in particular, we need to put 3 pieces of technology. 2 of them, I think, are fairly straightforward. But the third one, I think, is where the innovation would be. The first one is banknotes should have a chip so that you could irrevocably see whether the money is true or not. Right now, if you want to check on the ultimate validity of a banknote, you put it under some UV light or something like that. So through some expensive test. Well, why don't you just have a chip, read that chip, and the chip says whether it's real money or not. The second piece of technology that needs to happen is for the banknote to incorporate a little radio coil so that it can talk with your mobile phone, so that your mobile phone can check the status of that chip. So, if the status of the chip is 1, it's on, it's valid money. If it's 0, it's not valid money. Except that if you can, so imagine you can change the status of the bill from your mobile phone. And essentially what you're doing is doing a money transfer from the bill into your bank account. So you take a bill, you read the chip, status is 1, it's real money. You transfer the $10 out of the banknote, the status immediately changes to 0, and your bank account has plus $10 in it. So these are the 2 innovations that are fairly straightforward. But if you just do that, all I've done really is replicated a prepaid card. Though that's what prepaid cards are. At least the prepaid cards that work with local storing of value work like that. But the problem with that is still not like cash, because I cannot just look at the prepaid card and see whether it's 0 or 1. So the third innovation, I think, is the important one, which is that chip is able to change the outward appearance of the bill. Imagine that there's some digital ink, and when it's 1, the bill is in its full colorful glory, and when the status changes to 0, it switches to white. Just the color goes away. So that becomes then a bill that you can recognize as being on or off. So basically now you have a bill that there's 2 ways to see whether it's valid. One is the electronic acceptance. Stick it under your mobile phone, and the mobile phone will tell you whether it's valid money or not, and you can interact with your mobile phone. And that's fine for all the digital people. But what about my mother, who's never going to use a mobile phone and certainly not digital money? Well, she can continue using those banknotes in the way she's always done. All she needs to know is that if a banknote doesn't have any color, if you can't see any number on it, it's not real money. Well, that's not going to be very hard to explain that to her. So as long as she can see the bill in its full glory, she's going to assume it's a good bill. So that is the innovation of the smart banknote. Now you might say that this is all very futuristic. Well, I mean, with all things technology, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of when such technologies are going to be available. I want to remind you that the current trend is towards integrated circuits that are printed on plastic, no longer silicon. They're organic chips. So you can, plastic. So you can just print the chip on the banknote, just like you print banknotes today. You can print the coil for the radio interface, just like you print bills today. So it's not like you need to assemble them like a device. In the near future, you will be able to print these things. Perhaps the two parts that are less clear now as to how exactly that would happen is one, the user interface, the visible changing of the note so that my mother can recognize it as being off if value has been extracted out of the bill. And secondly, and probably the more important, is the integration between those three things. That the chip really controls the radio and the user interface, and that you cannot change one without changing the other. So I don't want to say that this is possible today, but frankly, if you want to find a definitive solution to financial inclusion, I would sink all the R&D money into this, because this is what can make financial inclusion possible, by just eliminating the number one cost of financial inclusion, which is the agent networks. Anybody can then continue working the way they have always done with cash if they don't want to change, and the rest of us can go on being modern and digitizing our own cash the moment we interact or get it from someone who paid us with cash. So just as a final thought, the problem with digitizing economies is a coordination problem. For us to do, if I want to pay you, we'll do it digitally only if you and I agree. If one of us disagrees, then we revert back to cash. So digitization presents a coordination problem. If you don't have digital, there's no way I can pay you digital, so I can only pay you cash. And it's this linking of the sender and the receiving having to agree on one format of money as being the one they want to use that retards progress, because there's enough people who do not want to, or really cannot, because of where they live, their circumstances, engage in digital money. With this system, you're breaking the decision of buyer and seller, of sender and receiver. Because if I'm a store owner, you walk into my store with a banknote because you're all backward and anachronistic, I'll take the banknote. It's not a problem at all, because I can instantly transfer that money into my bank account. So how you pay me is no longer any constraint for me as to how I want to take that money in. We separate the payer's problem from the recipient problem. And with that, essentially, we turned the mobile phone into our personal ATM. Mobile phones now are point-of-sale terminals, because we can issue payment instructions, we can accept money with it, but we cannot convert it. So with this innovation, then the mobile phone goes from being just a point-of-sale terminal to being an ATM. So that is the innovation, where I can manage all the formats of money that I want, because I can seamlessly transfer from the digital format to the bill format and vice versa. So that solves financial inclusion problem, and it also, as you can well imagine, solves the problem of distributing cash throughout the economy, because now you can distribute cash through normal retail channels, because presumably money would always circulate in its deactivated format with a chip value of 0, and value would be injected at the receiving end. So we would no longer need armored trucks to be carrying cash around, because all cash would be transported in its deactivated format. So that's the innovation that I'm talking about. And again, I don't want necessarily for you to buy this specific solution, but I want you to question whether it really is fair that we have to pick between cash and digital money and that one is the enemy of the other. So shall we open it to questions or comments?
Yes, thanks, Ignacio. We had a comment come in from Combi. Smart currencies are still a way off, but many countries around the globe are transacting using cryptocurrencies. Though not regulated in most jurisdictions in the world, citizens are trading in these global financial assets. How do we compare with smart currencies?
Well, I mean, cryptocurrencies are entirely digital, so they don't solve this problem at all. In fact, cryptocurrencies, if you want to go to cash, for cash in or cash out of your Bitcoin, say, you're having to do two conversions. So it's doubly expensive because first you'll need to go to an exchange. Say I have Bitcoin and I want to redeem them for cash because cash is what I want to use. Then first I need to go to Bitcoin exchange and exchange those Bitcoin for digital bank money. So I transfer that, I sell those Bitcoins and the money gets sent into my bank account. And then I need to find an agent or an ATM to convert my bank money into cash. It's a double conversion. So I think cryptocurrencies solve a different problem. They don't sell. Cryptocurrencies is about it's a re-engineering of the trust infrastructure. So you trust it because you trust the protocol, not because you trust the central bank. Whereas the smart banknotes is not really any innovation on money itself. It's about the format of the money. It's interoperability between two formats of money without getting into whether that money is US dollars, shillings, Bitcoins, or whatever.
Great, thanks, Ignacio. I hope that answers your question there, Combi. And we also had a really good question that's coming from Ruben about visually impaired people. So obviously there's often rail on existing banknotes. Well, what do you envision them being able to use in your new smart notes?
So two things on that. First, it would be the same situation as with banknotes today. So it would not be a bigger problem, except that now there's a better solution for them. It's like, well, if you're vision impaired, visual acceptance is not going to work for you. So you probably want to rely on electronic acceptance. So anytime someone gives you a bill, do put it under your mobile phone to check that the chip is 1. So if you don't want, if visual acceptance doesn't work for you, you have a second acceptance on the same instrument, which is digital acceptance. And that's the whole point of this innovation, that money is money. This is $10. How I choose to validate that $10 is true money is up to me. I can do it visually, I can do it digitally.
Great. We have another question coming in from Fahad. Is there any other interoperability solution between physical and digital cash? Is chip and changing color the only option? Can we have a voice as a natural interface channel, which links back through to Ruben's question?
Well, interesting. I hadn't thought about the voice, but still, yes. I mean, I don't know whether that'd be cheaper, but yeah, bills could have a button that speak to me. So it would be auditive. Interesting. I hadn't thought of that possibility. But at that point, yeah, all options I think should be pursued. Basically, for me, the point is not visual, but rather accepting money as a direct sensory experience without going through a device, without being forced to go through a device. Because having to go through a device all the time is a loss of personal power. And like sometimes we want to lose some of our personal power because we gain something. Like, for example, I don't keep all my cash under my mattress. I surrender some of my control over my money to my bank because they offer me some advantages. But the option of being self-reliant should always be there. I should always have the option of managing things on my own. And then it should be up to banks and anybody else to prove to me that I can do better if only I outsource some of the functions to them. So that is really the fight between today between physical cash and digital, where physical cash is the self-reliant option. I can store my money by myself. I can pay you by ourselves without involving anyone else, versus the current digital solution, which is basically removing power from your hands. You can no longer save digital money by yourself. You can no longer pay digitally by yourself. First, you need to plead with some financial institution who will accept you as a customer, and then negotiate fees to do what you could do before on your own. Now, again, there's many reasons why you might want to do that, but that should be an upsell. And that's why I am so passionate about keeping cash, because it's the self-reliant solution. It's the ultimate protection that we, the citizens, have against bank power.
Great. Yeah, definitely having cash physically in your hands is very different from having it in a bank.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, those of us who've lived through the 2008, 2007, 2008 global financial crisis, and I mean in developed countries, because it didn't really affect developing countries that much, but in Europe and the US and Spain, well, the periphery of Europe, I should say, Spain, Greece, Italy, US, countries like that, we know how vulnerable, now we feel in our gut how vulnerable our money is. And one thing that we've all done, and I'm certainly speaking for myself, and I think I'm speaking for the majority of my fellow Spaniards, is we keep a lot more cash at home than we used to. Because, the banks could stop issuing, the ATMs could stop issuing money tomorrow through a technology problem, through a financial crisis, through a central bank instruction. There's many reasons why the digital system can fail. And the difference between digital system failure and physical system failure is that the digital system failure is catastrophic, meaning it affects all your money at once. Whereas physical banknotes, they're still subject to failure. It's called counterfeit. But no one can counterfeit all the money at once. So maybe you'll lose some of your money, but not all of it, because your bills will have come from many different places. So that is another difference between physical money and digital money.
I guess sometimes it doesn't matter where we are in the world. We've all got something stored under the mattress, just in case, right?
Well, I didn't used to. Now I do, for sure.
Cool. And a great question here from Marcella about what would happen to the physical bill or note. So, once it's used and it goes colorless, does it recycle? Would the cost of that get passed to the customer?
Yeah, my idea on that is that these banknotes would be distributed through normal retail channels. So if you want to do a lot of cash out because you want to pay your employees in cash, for example, you have a digital account, but your employees you want to pay in cash, you would go around the local store and pick up a stash of this big of bills in their empty state. Now, there would be a nominal fee to them. I don't think it would be zero, and I don't think it would be the full cost of producing them either. You just want enough of a bill so that people, once they've cashed out the value, taken the value out of the bill, don't just throw them away, to encourage recycling. So, I don't know, it would be a few cents per note. You pick them up at the supermarket, you inject value, and then if you decide to remove the value, you would want to keep them in case you want to do a cash out in the future, or preferably you would just sell them back to some shop that takes them in and recycles them. So I see a charge that is less than the full cost of the bill, but more than zero, just for to keep incentives around.
It reminds me a lot of the glass bottle Coca-Cola type recycling. You pay a little bit for your glass and get it back when you return.
Exactly.
And that model seems to work very well in most countries. So there's no reason why the same thing couldn't work for money. So we have a question now from Godfrey regarding the interoperability. So the heart of the interface is interoperability to facilitate. Looking at Apple and iPhones and Android, whose responsibility would it be to make it work?
Yeah. So the way, I mean, I'm no technologist myself, but the way I imagine this working is that if you are a developer of some kind of money app, whether it's payment, banking, or whatever, anybody who has an app that manages people's digital accounts, digital money, would then have an option of dropping into their app a little kernel. So meaning there's a little piece of the app that they do not produce, the central bank produces. And they cannot alter. So it's that part of the app, which is common to all the apps, that is the one that deals with the banknotes and does the switching of 0 and 1. So that's how you keep a system safe and secure under the control of the central bank, so that all this can work. So basically, it's a single solution for the app kernel that deals with this, but then of course anybody can put functionality on top of that because it's my payment app and I do it this way and that way and the other. So that would be the idea. A core app freely available from the well, I shouldn't say freely. I mean available from the central bank to those players that are licensed to operate in banking and payments to drop that into their apps. And then, of course, this app kernel owned by the central bank would need to be updated from time to time as security standards improve and so on. And so you would work with all the app providers to upgrade that portion of the app as well as and when is required.
And so you started talking about central banks, Ignacio, and we've got a couple of questions from Isaac and again from Fahad. So have you spoken to any of the central banks about this? And are they ready to regulate this kind of digital economy?
I mean, central bankers are extremely conservative by definition. I talked to a central bank, very senior central banker of a major economy, and he was horrified with this idea. But it's I wouldn't expect you start this sale with the central bank. I mean, you have to start the sale with little demos and in a very controlled way. For example, there's no reason why this should work on $100 bills. Start it on $1 bills. I mean, how much catastrophe can happen because you flooded the market with $1 bills that have a little bit of a problem. Started as a in a campus, in a university environment. So there's many ways to test this idea once you have a prototype. And I think going straight to a central banker and saying, would you like to change everything about how you make money? The answer is likely to be no. Frankly, in the same way as would you like some Bitcoin? The answer is absolutely not.
So Alfred asks, what is the biggest challenge with smart notes? So obviously the central bank will be one of them. Are there any others?
Well, certainly from the technology point of view, I don't want to argue that all the technology is available today, or at least at a price, cost sensible level. I think one of the biggest impediments has been screens. Because a banknote, there's one thing I discovered in the process of doing research for this idea, because it always occurred to me, I always thought it was strange that metal coins, which seem more safe and secure, have less denomination value than paper, which seems easier to manipulate. But the answer is the opposite. The banknotes are far safer than coins. And the reason why that's the case is because those have much more surface area. It's all about surface area. If you want to make an instrument basically visual acceptance, you need a lot of surface area. There's not enough space on a coin to put in enough things that make you visually want to accept it or not. And the medium itself, metal, is hard to etch and so on, whereas embedding holograms, plastic strips, and all sorts of things in paper or in a flat surface is much easier. On a printable surface is a lot easier. So you need surface area. The problem then becomes, if you have surface area, that's great for visual acceptance, is not great for storage, because you want to be able to fold your money and put it in your wallet, your pocket, and stuff like that. So I think the biggest issue has been the idea of foldable screens. And by screen, I don't mean the full-fledged TV screen, but some foldable user interfaces that changes color. I think has been the main issue. But now, foldable screen technology is certainly very hot, with some mobile phones coming out soon, sporting that. So I expect the technologies around the screen to make it foldable to change very rapidly in the next few years, making this idea possible. But there is still one wrinkle. One thing is foldable, and the other one is bendable, and the other is foldable. These screens we're talking about, you can fold them. You can bend them, but you cannot really fold them the way you do a bill. But anyway, that's engineering. Maybe there's other ways to do it. So technology, I think, is the number one issue. But I'm not a technologist, so I'm not in a good position to assess that likelihood. But again, I think, as I said earlier, the nice thing about technology solutions is that time is on your side. So this is an interoperability solution where time is on your side. On the agents, as the alternative interoperability solution, I don't see how time makes that any better. In fact, time makes it worse, because that only increases the non-digital costs of a digital money system.
Great, and I guess those notes have got to be machine washable as well, just in case they end up in the laundry.
Absolutely. Laundry-proof. Oops.
I did that.
Let me say, by the way, that from an AML CFT point of view, which is something that people love to talk about, I don't, but people think it's very important. And I say I don't simply because my job is financial inclusion. I just can't believe we're talking about the problems of rich people, moving money around as the thing that prevents poor people from doing small transactions. I find that really odd. But anyway, from an AML CFT point of view, of course, anytime you're putting value into a bill, that creates a record, because it's always digital against currency. So you have much more of a record of who's taking cash out. That would be easily traceable, because this kernel of the app that the central bank produces could be reporting on that. So obviously, once the bill changes hands through visual acceptance, you lose that traceability. But in the context of any network, what's really most important is to understand who's going into the network and who's going out of the network. What are the cash in and the cash out points, just like we do today with the agents.
And cashing in and cashing out, how could that work across borders, international remittances, as Godfrey's question was suggesting?
Well, I mean, in principle, this would work within national currencies. So if I have US dollars that I want to send to Godfrey, Godfrey is where, in Uganda, or where's Godfrey?
I think Uganda.
Yeah, so I have US dollar banknotes I want to send to Godfrey. Well, I would do the cash in of my US dollar banknotes into my US bank account, and then I do the remittance through a normal digital remittance channel. And then Godfrey receives it into his account, and he would cash it out into shillings. So that would be a system where there's two different smart banknotes, one controlled by the US central bank, if it's dollars, and another one by the Ugandan central bank. So those are completely separable decisions. And it was what I was saying earlier, that the nice thing about this is you separate the decision of sender and receiver, making the problem easier. Now, obviously, one can talk about global interoperability solutions where the same piece of plastic or banknote, you can inject dollars or shillings into it. So there could be multi-currency things depending on what instruction you give at the moment of cashing in. But in theory, it's possible that I would be able to produce banknotes with one currency or the other, although central banks might have something to say about that. Equally, the other question that usually comes up is that the bill could be so smart that I could inject any value I want into it. So, would you continue with the US dollar 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 series? Or will you just have one banknote, which makes it all much cheaper, and then you choose how much value to put into it? So there's three scenarios. One is where there's separate banknotes of each denomination, and so the chip is 0 or 1. The second option is where the chip can take multiple values, but only specific values. The chip can only take 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. And then just depends on how much I transfer from my bank account. And then the right number appears on the visually readable screen or user interface. And the third possibility is where I can inject any value, $33 if I like, because that's what I want to use. Now, I think the third option is the worst. I think the advantage of cash is keep it simple. So agreed denominations for me is the way to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think it would be quite confusing if you could put any value on making people have less choice sometimes. Too much choice is a bit paralyzing at times as well.
Yes. And at that point, you're impinging on my mother again. She's never seen a $33 bill. What is this thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're used to dealing with currency in fixed denominations anywhere you go in the world.
Which is a huge advantage. I think it's one of the most underappreciated advantages of cash, the fact that it's fixed denomination. Digital money is a continuum. It's continuous. It can be anywhere between 0 and infinity, the status of my bank account. That is really hard to manage, a continuum. And that's why cash works so well, because you're breaking it up into discrete amounts or containers, which makes management so much easier. For example, if you're going to hold $100 under your mattress, it's definitely not the same psychologically for you. You're not going to handle those $100 the same if it's one $100 bill, 10 $10 bills, or 100 $1 bills. Those are vastly different things, even though monetarily it's the same. Why? Because if it's 100 $1 bills, temptation is there all the time. Whereas you want to go out drinking with your friends, really, you're going to break 100. You're going to go to the corner bar and get $99.50 in change for the drink that you just bought, and then what are you going to do with that? So the fact that it's fixed denomination is hugely significant for people to make it manageable, and also for certain circumstances. I want to go out jogging in Central Park. It's, let's say, or some park that is not safe. I want to take $10 just in case I need to take a taxi home, but only $10. I can do that. I just pick a $10 bill from my wallet. Now, how do you take $10 on digital money? With digital money, you're taking your bank account all the time, everywhere. You're taking a continuous, a running number, a continuous number, continuously. I want to go to the casino, for tonight to have some fun. I want to take $100. That's all I want to take, $100. To manage discreteness in a digital setting is extremely hard. Extremely hard. Yes, I could create a sub account of let's say for the jogging scenario, I create a sub account in which I transfer $10 into it, and I take that when I go jogging. But what does that mean? I take that. You're not taking the pin to your other account either. I mean, you don't forget the pin, right? And if you have to be blocking your main account while I'm out jogging, well, what happens if there is an emergency and I need all my money then? So it's extremely hard to manage discreteness of money in a digital setting. And I think it's one of the main advantages of cash. It's extremely easy to manage in a bunch of situations.
And I think that's a really great point, that we don't need to have just cash or just digital, actually, because the psychology of how we want to spend, save, use our money, it does lend itself to different types and different situations, and taking away that choice isn't, on forcing people to the other, it isn't the answer.
Absolutely. I think our approach with digital money is we need to change people so that they see the benefits of the money that we're trying to force on them. No, we shouldn't have to change people. We need to change our money so it suits them as opposed to the other way around. So it suits you to go digital. Do go digital. It doesn't suit my mother to go digital. Don't force her. Don't make her feel like she's not worth it. Just don't. Just let her get on. My general philosophy, and I'm coming from a financial inclusion perspective, it's very hard for me to justify any action on financial inclusion grounds that eliminate people's options. I think inclusion and more options go hand in hand. Inclusion and elimination of options, I just don't, they just don't go together for me. Thank
you. A couple more questions, similar questions coming in from Hamilton, Joao and Combe. So one of the questions is about what is the potential cost for printing these currencies, and is there any prototypes or any organizations out there that are working on them?
No one working on it, no prototype. I'm not enough of a technologist to build my own. I did do a little, I hired consultants consult Hyperion 7 years ago to see how likely this was. And at the time, it was a cute idea, not very likely in the short term, but I haven't repeated that exercise. So, this idea I had where I was working at the Gates Foundation, I was hoping that would be the big idea that would be the equivalent of solving world health problems by finding the malaria vaccine, frankly, in financial inclusion. The vaccine that we need, the equivalent of vaccine we have in financial inclusion is interoperability between cash and digital. I mean, that's the big thing. But unfortunately, didn't sell it. So anybody who wants to own it, sell it, run with it, prototype it, please go ahead.
Combe seems keen, so maybe we will connect with him after the webinar.
Yes. I by the way, I've taken no IP on this, so just anybody can run with it.
And that's a bank. Combe's from Bank of Zambia, so if we could maybe even get a central bank on board as well, which would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
We've got another question about distribution from Beryl. So,
Combe, let me say, I think to develop something like this, you would need the resources of a Gates Foundation because it's a huge technology challenge. So, I would encourage you to bring it up with them. It's like, they know about this because I've told them this idea, but somehow it just seems too weird, I suppose. So feel free to bring it up with them. I think they're the players to make this happen, both because of the foundation, lots of money, and the technology know-how that can be brought to bear through the Bill Gates, Microsoft sort of connections.
And of course, as well, we've just launched the Association for Digital Finance Practitioners in Zambia as well. So perhaps they can also be on the project too. So that would be great. So get in touch with us. We want to know more. Oh, cool. So let's go back to Beryl's question about how distribution of non-active notes and active notes would be in a national level. So some being more cash in and more cash out in different areas of the country, perhaps. How would that work?
Well, that's a nice thing. Is that if the central bank stops having any responsibility for moving cash around, you just buy it at the supermarket. If in a particular area people are doing more cash in, that means, as in rural areas, that means that they want to buy empty bills because they want to put money in it as soon as they receive the money transfer from their relative in the capital. So stores in rural areas would stock more empty banknotes in the same ways that they would store more fertilizer than a store in an urban center, because an urban center probably there's less demand for notes. There's more digital people, more sending, less receiving. And so each store would be able to decide how much cash they want to make available for their community, always in its deactivated form. And the moment you receive a money transfer, whether it's from a rich relative in the capital, it's a G2P payment the government is making to you, it's a humanitarian payment in a crisis situation, you get the money, you transfer the value into a banknote that you pick up locally, and that's it. So, law of demand and supply would make the bills appear wherever, because you're taking it out of a specialized distribution circuit and you're putting it in a mainstream distribution circuit, just like toothpaste and Coke and everything else.
Great, thank you, Ignacio. And I see Rob has got his hand up, so I'm going to allow Rob to talk and ask his question. Rob, are you there?
You seem to be muted.
No. Sorry. I pressed a button by mistake. Sorry.
Are you sure you don't have a question while you're live, Rob?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us anyway. Okay, so we'll head back to the Q&A. And Fahad raises an interesting questions about privacy. Will people be worried about the government, the notes?
Rob, if you could go on mute.
There we are, he's on mute.
Sorry, what was the question?
What about smart bank notes in terms of privacy and government tracking, perhaps the chips, etc. in them?
That would be no different to today. I mean, the government or central bank or can track your cashing in and cashing out activities in the same way as they can track in a Bitcoin setting the amount of Bitcoin you buy and sell at exchanges. And that's because those transactions involve your bank account. Anytime your bank account is involved, there is full traceability, or at least the potential of it. So you transfer $10 from your bank account into a note, they'll know it because that transaction got recorded because it involved your bank account. So all the points in and out, you get the same level of traceability as you have today. But once you have the physical note, it will be as anonymous as current banknotes are, because that's the whole point of it, is visual acceptance. No changing of the status of no changes in the digital status of the bill simply because it changed hands. So it will be just like cash today.
Okay, great. And Fahad is also interested in chatting with the central bank in Pakistan, who are working with Gates Foundation. So maybe that's another destination where this money, this idea can be discussed anyway. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. I see a comment from Godfrey. From your own experience in Spaniards, stacking a lot of cash that I do now after 2008, does it not send shock to the those that are excited to move towards more digital money? It's like, yeah, no, but I think digital money is great. I just don't want to make religion of it. Convince people digital money is good for them. Don't reduce options, convince them. So I always think that anytime there's a new platform, a new service, it's up to you to convince people that that's better than what came before. So I don't want to create religion out of digital. Convince me that digital is better than cash. Well, I mean, I can tell you I have far more cash in my bank account than I do under my mattress, a lot more. So clearly, I see the advantage of digital money. Otherwise, I would have it all under my mattress. So all I was saying is that it's easier for me to imagine short-term situations where money fails. For a period of a week, 2 weeks, and try to protect yourself against that. And why not hold a little bit of cash? It's an exercise of free choice that I want to do. that cost me very little, but I certainly don't want to sound like I'm not trusting digital money, because the vast majority of my money is in digital format in bank accounts. But let's not be absolutists about it.
Well, we're almost approaching the hour, so and I think we've covered most of the questions. Some of them were a little bit similar, so we haven't touched on every single one, but I hope that we've managed to cover all of the questions that all of our participants have raised. And Ignacio, any final thoughts before we close the session?
No, well, thank you all so much for attending. We will be publishing a podcast of this webinar on our website soon, so you will be able to share it with anyone you think may get some value from it. And yes, Central Bank of State Bank of Pakistan as well, Fahad, that'd be great. I also want to take this opportunity to tell you about the brand new course I've just developed on artificial intelligence, which you might be interested in. It's a 9-week course. It's a fairly in-depth look at artificial intelligence and what it means for financial services. And it aims to provide a business perspective on the opportunities and pitfalls associated with the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. But of course, in order for you to understand the business implications, you do need to understand a little bit of the basics of how it works, because what's most important for you to develop an intuition as to when artificial intelligence and machine learning can help and when not. So we get into some of the technical details, but not too much. It's fundamentally an applications course. I'm the core teacher of the course, but I'm working alongside David Dalcer from BFA and Harry Wilson from CityBeats, who have a much more of a hands-on experience with these applications. The general applications for the course closed yesterday, but we will be accepting late applications from all webinar attendees until March 28. So that's 2 more days. The fee for the course is $500, but if you can get a 30% discount when you apply if you use the discount code WebinarAI30 when you apply. So just to put this code, and just for the simple act of humoring me for an hour, you get a 30% discount. We'll send you an email with this information shortly. So I look forward to seeing you all on this course.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Ignacio. It was a fantastic conversation. I think we've all got a lot to go away and think about, and really, look at our choices that we make. And I think a couple of our participants have got to go away and try and make this happen in reality. Hey?
Yes.
Wonderful. So we'll be emailing you the code, as Ignacio just said, and the link to the webinar will be available on our website shortly as well. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar. And thank you, Ignacio.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.